Okay, 3, 2, 1, and we're live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Brittany. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I'm excited to hear tales from your travels. I'm sure you've got some exciting anecdotes for us. So tell me, how was it? You've just come back from your holiday. Tell me about it.
Oh boy, we did lots of stuff and we stopped in so many places on the way down, which I shared a little bit of in the last one. But it was overall really good. By the time I got home, I was graveled out because every campsite had gravel
Oh,
on
yeah.
all the roads. And so I was like happy to be home and, on flat ground where my wheels didn't get stuck. But yeah, I don't know. We went from So I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, or near there. And we traveled in 4 days to the final destination, which was West Yellowstone, Montana.
Cool.
And we stopped the first night in Milk River, which is a town that I showed in the last podcast with all of the hoodoos, which are like what we call those rock formations. And then we stopped in a town called Great Falls, which was not, it was not great. Like the town is great. The town was great, but the campground was just kind of like, it was kind of crap. So we ended up just doing laundry there, Jamie and I. So I didn't even really take any footage from that one just because it wasn't very nice. And then the third night we stopped at a hot springs, which was so underwhelming compared to what the pictures were showing. So we got there and it was just like extremely busy, and it was awesome because like they were legitimate hot springs, that are heated from underground with natural springs, and they had all of the mineral content in the water and everything. So that was good. But it was crazy busy. So, all the pools were full. And then we ended up going to the inside pools, which was not ideal because it was nice outside. But yeah, we went inside, and then the kids are like, "Where's this, like the area where you can play?" And I'm like, there really isn't any, because it ended up being more like a spa. Like
Yeah.
there's like a workout area, and then people go into the hot pools to get the minerals from the water and to sort of soften their skin and all that stuff. So it ended up being more like that. So I think the kids lasted about 45 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And then they were like, this sucks. And it was
It's
so
nature.
expensive. It was so expensive. We paid like, I think it was like $188 for one night to camp at these
Oh,
hot
wow.
springs. And it ended up being like three something, or no, almost $300, 288 or something Canadian, because our dollar sucks. So when we
Yeah.
travel to the US, we're paying like 40 cents more for every dollar that we spend, and it's like annoying. So yeah, the hot springs were underwhelming, but the campsite was really awesome. It was super wheelchair accessible because there was like a concrete patio. So that was like the most accessible campsite, but the attraction was kind of sucky.
Yeah.
And then we finally made it to our campsite, which was amazing for accessibility of all the bathrooms. Like every single bathroom was accessible, but they were all just vault toilets, which are like fancy outhouses.
Yeah.
So no running water, and no showers or anything,
Mm.
and lots of gravel. But it ended up being a really nice campsite. And when we got there, I was using the washroom, and I ended up meeting the camp hosts, which are the people that are responsible for maintaining the campsite and cleaning the bathrooms and stuff. And because they met me like the first day, they made sure to clean the bathrooms really well every day. So it was like the most pleasant experience because I'm so visible, and I like wouldn't have had, I don't think I would have had such a pleasant stay had I not sort of made friends with the camp host like on that first day, which is really awesome. Which just brings up the whole like notion of being noticeable and conspicuous is sometimes a really positive thing.
Yeah.
Because then they started like paying attention to every other bathroom and how many of them had a little lip to get in, and they're like, oh, this is probably an issue. So just because I talked to them that first day, I ended up doing like a whole campground review. And so I went around and showed them like areas that needed improving and all of that stuff. So it was like,
Mm.
it was awesome that I'm in a wheelchair because, you know, they probably wouldn't have just cleaned the
Yeah.
bathroom special for any other person. I don't
Did you
think
tell them
anyway.
that you were a YouTuber?
I did, and it's so funny because he ended up being a YouTuber too. So the
No
camp
way.
host, yeah, the camp host was a YouTuber. And his YouTube channel is not just like an easy one to remember. So I'll try and like put it in the comments and pin it on the bottom of this. But I was like, you should do the day in the life of a camp host because I'm like, it's so interesting. Like, what do you do
Yeah.
all day? And he ended up doing that because I suggested it, and then we found each other a few times during the trip, and we, you know, talked to each other on each other's content. So yeah, I'll have some pictures of him on my trip video when I finally get it edited. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
Nice. That sounds amazing. Are there any
Yeah.
highlights or special memories that you hold dear about your trip?
Yeah, I want to say that this trip was probably the least involved, or like we didn't do a bunch of sightseeing or anything. So we played a lot of games,
Mm.
and we just kind of hung out. We went into West Yellowstone a couple of the days just to get groceries and things. And then the day that we kind of went in for sightseeing, we just kind of shopped, which isn't like my cup of tea, but I was with a whole bunch of other people. And so the things that I wanted to do and nobody else really wanted to do. So I was just kind of like, oh, well, I don't want to spend the money if nobody else wants to do it. But had I been by myself, there was like a dinner theater in town, and it was just a small town, but I love musical theater. So I'm like, I would have totally went to the dinner theater if anybody else wanted to go with me. But everybody was like, yeah, that sounds really boring. I'm like, okay, I'll just hang out and play games with you guys. But there was a dinner theater, there was like a grizzly wolf discovery center that we could have gone to, but again, nobody was really interested in that except for me. Um, yeah, and then there was like a couple of other cool things like aerial courses with zip lines and stuff that we never ended up doing. So we just walked around and like took in some of the, you know, local shops and got some candy and things like that. But yeah, we mostly played games with my cousin and just visited because we don't get to see them very often.
Mm.
We went on side by side rides, which is like an ATV. So we did that, which my
Oh yeah.
kids loved. Um, and yeah,
Did that
just
mean does that
overall,
mean you have to leave your wheelchair and get on the ATV? How's that?
yeah,
'Cause that must be quite scary being, separated from your wheelchair. I know it makes me nervous.
it wasn't too super scary because I knew where my wheelchair was. When my
Yeah.
wheelchair, if I have to leave, like if it's a commercial um building or like a, you know, where they're renting the side by sides and I have to leave my wheelchair somewhere where I'm not familiar, but it was my cousin's side by side. So I was able to leave my wheelchair just in our trailer, and so I wasn't super scared. And I was with my cousin one of the times who can lift me, and she's, you know, pretty strong, and then my husband the other time. So
Mm.
I was pretty secure and comfortable doing it, but um, I get nervous on things like that. Like I think I have like a touch of PTSD. So like
Mm.
if we go fast and I don't trust the person that's driving, like I was a little more nervous with my cousin until I started to trust her driving.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
It's
was.
interesting that you brought that
Go ahead.
up because that's what I thought. I thought because you had your accident on a Skidoo, right? So it's kind of similar. And when you're
Yeah.
not the driver and you're in control, and obviously you've had a serious traumatic incident from that. Yeah, so it's weird that you brought that up. Like, did you have any feelings of like, oh, like
I always do, and my brain is a total asshole, which I've talked about this before in my newsletter before, where like I catastrophize things like really fast. Like I'll come up with a horrible scenario in my head and it just plays really quickly. But then my brain starts to like, you know, manufacture all those stress hormones. And so, you know, like my first thought when I get on the quad is like, you know, somebody's going to die and we're going to be stuck in Montana plenty, you know what I mean? Like that's literally how dark it goes.
Mm.
And so I have to really like I like compile evidence against that, because that's sort of like what I've learned to do with cognitive behavioral therapy is to just, you
Mm.
know, take the thought, recognize it, and then try to build evidence that the thought is probably not helpful. And so I do that really quickly when I'm doing things, and so that I'm not like stressed out. But there were a few times that, you know, my cousin's like, okay, we're gonna go really fast, and I'm like, oh my god, right? But then she never ended up really going fast because her toddler was also on the ride with us. And then my husband, when he took me, he realizes where my balance and stuff is. And in this particular side by side, if anybody is into ATVing and you ever want to go, you have to sort of make sure that the setup of the actual vehicle is conducive to your level of injury. So I have a friend that I ride with sometimes here locally, and he has a side by side that has lots of places to hang on. Like in front, there's bars that you can hold on to, and on the side, there's bars you can hang on to. So where your balance is limited, you have areas in the actual ATV to compensate. But in this side by side, it didn't have anything to hang on to. So I was really left balancing sort of with my lap, and it wasn't very good. So my husband knew that he couldn't go fast. So it was okay.
What
But
about the seat? Did the seat have any sort of bucket, or was there a
no,
seat belt at all?
there was a seat belt, but the seat was
Oh,
really weird. Like it was like a 90, very 90 degree. And it wasn't like where you could like sort of sit down into the seat. Like it was almost pushing my back forward. Even my husband said that. He's like, yeah, it's like pushing you forward a little bit. So I couldn't, we definitely couldn't do some of the funner things that we would have done in a side by side or ATV that's set up more for somebody that doesn't have as much balance. But yeah, so
it's
yeah, I
interesting to hear your cognitive behavioral therapy, because I wanted to know if you had any techniques to calm that inner voice. And it's I'd love to expand on that a tiny bit more, because I have never done that.
yeah.
So when you obviously have those dark thoughts come up, you said you have to build evidence to support the fact that, you know, this is I guess if you're in a court, you would build the
Mhm.
evidence to counter that case. Do
Yeah.
you want to expand on that like a tiny bit more? Because I'm actually really interested
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah, I absolutely will. I think of it exactly like a cross examination in
Mhm.
a court case. And that's kind of what they teach you to think of it like when you go to like a therapist. Because your brain generally, everything that your brain does in sort of risk assessment is generally trying to keep you safe and healthy. But there's a lot of things that it sort of over exaggerates. And so you have to prove to yourself, in your logical thinking mind, that it is an over exaggeration of the danger that it's trying to sort of put you in, right? Or think that you're going to be in. So my first step is always to acknowledge the thought. It's there. Thank my asshole brain for coming
Yeah.
up with the thought, because you know your brain is a really helpful tool. It can either it's the thing that like gives you imagination, and I always say that I would rather have an amazing imagination, even if it comes up with horrible scenarios sometimes, than
Mhm.
be somebody who doesn't have a good imagination. So I always thank my brain, and I do call my brain an asshole a lot, but my brain isn't actually an asshole. It's amazing. So I always acknowledge the thought. I thank my brain for the ability to have the thought, because you know so many of us have cognitive delays or other things that might make it more difficult to make those risk assessments. And they're actually really helpful in the end, because people who have no ability to have any risk assessment have sort of dangerous behaviors, and you know that can lead to really bad stuff too. So I thank my brain, and then I start the sort of cross examination. I go like, is this thought true? So just as an example, I'm going on this ATV, and I'm like, I could die today, or I could die on this ATV right now. And I go, okay, is this thought true? Yes, it is definitely true, because you never know what's
Mhm.
going to happen. But is it likely?
Mhm.
Probably not, because the tracks that we're going on are made for ATVs. They are groomed by Forestry Service in Montana. They are maintained by the Forestry Service so that they are safe. There are, you know, the vehicle is safe. Like my cousin changed the oil and it's got gas and the tires are good. So then you start like building evidence for why it's actually not likely that you're going to die, right? And
Mhm.
then the last thing that I kind of do after I've built evidence sort of against that is I tell myself that if something were to happen, I can handle it. Because for me,
That's a good one.
the thing that always makes me the worst and my anxiety the worst is the fear that I can't handle whatever is coming. And I think a lot of people, when they start to have panic attacks, is they're like, I'm going to die. This is so uncomfortable. I can't handle it anymore. And the more you tell yourself those things, the more your body spirals into sort of like that fear that you can't handle it. So it's sort of just a process that I've learned to go through as I've kind of
Yeah.
dealt with more anxiety throughout my life. And it works for me. So like
Yeah.
acknowledge, thank, and then build the evidence, and then tell yourself you can handle whatever your fear of happening is. Tell yourself you can handle it.
I love that. I love that. I feel like writing
Yeah.
that down. Acknowledge, thank, build the case, and then you can handle it. I really love the you can handle it.
Yeah.
I've got a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's by Susan Jeffers. It's a great book. And one of the main points about the book is the fear of doing something never goes away until you do it. And then
Yes.
then one of the main things in the book is like, but what if it doesn't? And then you just tell yourself, I'll handle it. And then she says, how do you know you're going to handle it? She says, well, if you look back on your life, anything that's ever happened to you, you have handled it. So you've got
Yeah.
a track record, a solid base of evidence that anything that's ever happened to you, you can handle it. So you will handle whatever happens. Interestingly enough, rereading the book fairly recently, it said about paralysis, like handling paralysis. And I was like, oh, interesting. I handled that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really cool. So if I am nervous about anything, I could be like, yeah, I'm going to handle it because I've got a track record of handling everything. So that's really
Yeah.
fascinating. And that works for you. Hey, that like really works. And you've got a track record of using the CBT to overcome fears, like whether they're irrational or otherwise.
Yeah. It really does work for me, and I use cognitive behavioral therapy for everything, like pain management, my nerve pain, because you're not really changing. The
Mm,
goal is not to change your feelings. Your goal is to change your response to your feelings.
mm,
So if you have like say you get sad and then you're like, "Oh, you're such an idiot for being sad about this," and all that stuff, then it just makes it worse. And if you are anxious about being anxious, it makes the anxiety worse.
mm,
Or if you're, berating yourself for being fearful, it just makes it worse. So I'm never trying to get rid of things. I'm just trying to change my ability to respond to it better. So like if I have nerve pain, instead of, being like, oh, this hurts so bad, I can't stand it anymore, I try to calm myself down, stop tensing my muscles, and be like, this is an interesting feeling. And then it reduces the activation of the brain centers that are kind of interpreting it as pain, and
mm,
starts increasing the activation of brain centers that are interpreting it as just some odd feeling, right?
mm.
And so I do that with like almost everything, and it's worked really well for me, because I think the types of therapy that try to actually get rid of things just make it harder to deal with future things. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Interesting. Like, I'm not sure if it'll work with nerve pain. I think it might, but I heard on a podcast recently, I think it was a podcast, they were saying about where if you're feeling anxiety, like the trick is to get curious about it. So like, okay, cool, I'm
Yes.
feeling anxious. Like, where am I feeling it? And you're like, oh,
Hmm.
well, I feel it here. And you're like, okay, well, do you reckon it's more to the left or to the right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, is it more to the front or to the back? And then all of a sudden, when you think about, you remove yourself and you're like, well, where is this anxiety? And then, once you've removed yourself from the anxiety, you feel less anxious. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm not sure if you could do it with nerve pain. So you're like, where is that pain? Like, I know exactly where it is. It's on my feet. It's like burning sensations all over my feet. Okay, is it more to the left or to the right? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure there is a technique that can be used for nerve pain for sure.
Yeah, for me it's always like it's not the curiosity necessarily about the nerve pain. It's just that I try to calm my body down when I'm having nerve pain, because I get like electrical, it feels like electrocution at my chest level sometimes,
Mm,
and it's really uncomfortable. So like whenever I get like a zing in my chest, then I'm like, I tense up. And so I've just had to actively be like, when that's happening, don't tense up. Don't stop what I'm doing. don't, because I used to have like where I would rub my arm to try and like distract myself from the pain. Like I had all these other weird coping things, and I had to stop all of that in order to just be like, it's happening, it's there. What an interesting feeling. It's like, you know,
Mm,
and it doesn't work all the time because sometimes nerve pain can get pretty brutal, and it just
mm,
kind of destroys everything that's happening. But I try very hard to distract myself so that the brain centers that are interpreting the pain can't, like, they have to do something else. Like they can't be as busy. But yeah. I was going to say
nice.
something and then I forgot.
That sounds good. That sounds great. We can get back to your holiday if you want. I just
Yeah.
noticed we've got I've got a comment from Wheelchair Rick, and I just wanted to shout out because it was actually on my list of shout outs. I went on his Wheelchair Wednesday podcast recently.
Oh,
He
cool.
does a live, and he asked me 10 questions about life in a wheelchair, and I will put the link in the description actually because it's a great conversation, and it's interesting to be on the receiving end of conversations, seeing as I've been hosting so many podcasts lately. But he was like, how did you get injured, like pet peeves, and advice for newly injured wheelchair users, and it was really great. He does it with quite a lot of other wheelchair users, and he's got a playlist, and I watched a few of the other ones, and I think it's really good. It's a great resource for people that are newly injured. So shout out to Wheelchair Rick, and thanks for having me on the show. In fact, I think you should go on his show. I think it would be really cool.
Oh, I'd love to. That's really awesome. We should tag his channel in the pins under this episode once we have it posted.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Um,
that was really fun, actually. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, no, I've got a funny. No, go on. What were you going to say? I've got a funny story.
I was just going to ask you a question about travel because I was trying to think back when I was like preparing for this episode of my very first experience traveling in a wheelchair, and I can't remember. I can't remember where I went, what I did, how I felt. Like, and that's so weird because you would think that um, it would be important, but maybe it wasn't because I was obviously like a teenager and I was with my parents, so I knew I had somebody safe and that was going to help me. It was probably just to a doctor's appointment in the city because I lived 5 hours away from the city. But I was trying to think of when my first experience traveling was, and I couldn't think of it. So I wanted to ask you if you could remember what your first experience was traveling in a wheelchair, how you felt, where you went, like
Mm,
what, all of that, because that's
okay.
always interesting.
Good question. Very good
Yeah.
question. I do know what it is, and it was when I went. So I flew to the UK, and it's interesting. Like I did want to bring this up because a lot of people are really scared of flying because
Mhm.
of the publicity that damaged wheelchairs get, and I do
Yeah.
get that. Like sometimes if you fly, your wheelchair will get damaged, but I think there are so many voices, so many amplified voices scaring people about,
Yeah.
because I was like, oh my god, what if I was really really paranoid, and now I've traveled quite a lot. I'm like, oh, I'm fairly confident my wheelchair is going to come out in one piece.
Mhm.
So yeah, so anyway, so that was number one. I was like, shit, is my wheelchair going to be okay? And it was absolutely fine. I had a really great time on the plane. Like I think it's really important for me to empty my bladder before I get on, so I don't need a wee. But then I also use the self-contained catheters, so if I needed to do it in the seat, it's not the end of the world. I'd probably just
Yeah.
put like a jacket over my head. Um, so in answer to your question, yeah, the first time I went on a plane was an interesting experience, and yeah, you just go through special assistance. You have to go on the ambi lift. People help you on. You go in the aisle chair. It wasn't as bad as again. Most of the stories you hear online is how bad it is, or like
Yeah.
what you should expect, and put an air tag in your wheelchair. All great tips, by the way. Take pictures of your wheelchair before you get on. All stuff like that, which is good. But I wouldn't let it scare you. My flight experience was amazing. I flew into Bristol, and they've got such a lovely, endearing accent when you get off the plane in Bristol. Like, hello, mate. How you going? I'll get your wheelchair. You stay there, and it's really nice. So I flew into a lovely place with a lovely accent. We had a lovely holiday. It was really great, and yeah, and then I flew back on my own, which was really nice. So yeah, I was quite confident, and ever since then, I have felt a lot more confident flying, and and quite exciting to go in. Quite exciting to go in the airport. And what I've noticed is sometimes the special assistance people are used to pushing you or and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh no, it's fine. I don't need pushing. They're like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I'm fine. Yeah. So I think I don't know. Does that answer your question?
That answered my question. Yeah. Sort of a follow up to that question that I was curious about is if you've had any travel like horror stories or like, you know, travel experiences that were negative, that were just, you know, you came back and you were like, oh my God, that was the worst experience ever.
I
Or
don't
like,
think so.
no,
No,
oh, that's
no.
good. Yeah.
There was a time where I went for my birthday, and so my 40th birthday a couple years back, and the flight got delayed. They said, "Oh, you can't fly. You know, the flight's been cancelled. You can either have your money back or book a new one." So I had to book a new one for the Sunday, but I'd only brought enough catheters with me to last the trip. So I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So, and I just put a shout out on a Facebook page called SCI Owners Club. It's kind of a sort of UK centric base. And yeah, a lot of people were like, yeah, sweet. I met up with loads of different people giving me a few catheters. It was nice to meet other people in wheelchairs. But it was interesting to see all the different types of catheters, like ones that go, you know, like I always use the same brand. So like the ones that go straight into the toilet instead of like the self-contained ones, all sorts of other different ones. And I remember thinking, man, no wonder people get like UTIs. I'm like, all these other brands of catheters feel quite clumsy, whereas my one is just like whoop, and it goes straight in, straight out. But some of them are covered in like a plastic sheath, which feels like really clumsy to try and slide it out. So yeah, when it comes to travel, that was pretty much it. Like almost running out of catheters, but having a great community that just gave me some fun ones to try out. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the only thing that's ever happened to me too, is like I once ran out of my like baclofen on a trip, or almost ran out, and I had to like ration it because I forgot my pills when I was leaving for Mexico, and I just had a few of them in my backpack, so that was really bad for a few of the days that I was there, and really uncomfortable. And then my last trip to Mexico, when I forgot half of my supplies, but it made me realize that I overpack a lot because I don't actually need all of them. And I was able to sort of make it through. And you can mostly fumble your way through with getting things in other countries. It just isn't exactly what you would, you know, get here. But yeah.
That is really interesting. I on the subject of the baclofen, that's something that really scares me, because baclofen's the sort of drug that you get serious withdrawals from if you stop taking it. And I'm on 120 milligrams a day, which is quite high. So if I suddenly lost it on a trip, I would be like, shit, like I really need to get some. Otherwise, I don't really know. I haven't researched it, but it's meant to be really bad. I think you can die from baclofen withdrawal. So that's what I read recently somewhere. And I thought, oh, how awful. So yeah, that's actually really scary. And it feels interesting to be tied to a medication. And I'd love to be able to wean off of it. But every time I take less, my spasms are unbearable. And I know what it's like for people with baclofen pumps as well. I guess that's even worse. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of freedom I've got since being in a wheelchair. Well, since first being in a wheelchair to now, I've built up so much wheelchair skills and extra freedoms. But man, yeah, like we were talking about the other day, like in a post-apocalyptic world, there'll be no baclofen. I'd have to wean myself off it and then just suffer. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't like that I'm tied to that medication. But yeah, I am. How much do you take a day?
I take 80 milligrams a day. I used to take the same as you. And then it's taken me a really long time to wean down. Like I've had to go so slowly because it is really uncomfortable to come off of it. And the less dosage you're on, the smaller the increments have to be that you can reduce. So if you're on like 120 milligrams, you can reduce it by 5 milligrams a day easily, or 10 milligrams a day for like a month, and then go down. But once you're on 80 milligrams a day, you have to reduce it by like 2 milligrams a day, just because the larger the increment, or the larger the percentage of the dose that you're on, the more discomfort you're going to experience as you're reducing it. So, but yeah, I have successfully reduced the dosage by half, but it's taken probably 5 years, which seems like an exorbitantly long
Wow.
time
Yeah.
to reduce the amount. But I have to stay on the same dose for like a very long time before my body like adjusts to it. And then I can go down a little bit. And then it takes a very long time for me to get used to that dose. And my nerve pain gets worse when I go down. There's just a whole bunch of things that are really uncomfortable. I almost wish that they hadn't put me on such a high dose when I left the hospital. But again, my spasticity was so crazy when I was first paralyzed, probably because I didn't do enough stretching. And now I do a lot of stretching. So my spasticity is really manageable with the medication and the stretching. But yeah, to me, it's just not, I don't have the desire to go through the discomfort to reduce it more at this point. But yeah, it is a really scary drug to be on in terms of like that. If you stopped immediately, like if something happened and you stopped immediately, like you could actually die. So yeah, when I was in Mexico, I had to reduce it by like half when I realized that I
Oh,
had forgot my pills, and it was super uncomfortable. Like it was
wow.
probably like the worst 5 days of my life because it was like so uncomfortable. Like my body was just in such severe withdrawal. But I wasn't like in like that dangerous withdrawal where I was having like seizures or anything. It was just very uncomfortable because my central nervous system was so used to having that dose of baclofen, and it was, you know, really
Mm.
active. I want to say like I just had horrible nerve pain, like my spasticity was crazy. So it was just uncomfortable to be me for like 5 days. And the plane ride home was kind of crazy. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, I want to say that that's probably like the worst travel experience I've had was just
Yeah.
that coming back from that trip.
Yeah. So tell me more about going from 120 to 80. How's your spasticity at 80 milligrams a day?
My spasticity is actually better than it was when I was on at 120, but it's because
No
I've
way.
incorporated. Yeah, it's because I've incorporated so much stretching though. Like I have non-negotiable stretching every morning. If you guys have ever
Yeah.
seen my video there, I just do like a 3-minute stretch that's like a hamstring stretch. And that took me a really long time to get to because I couldn't even sit up in bed. My
Mm.
spasticity would just immediately push me back down. I couldn't sit forward. My stomach would flex, my legs would flex, my feet wouldn't bend at 90 degrees. Like I had
Oh,
really
wow.
tight everything. And it took me 2 years to be able to sit up and sit forward. And then finally I could grab my foot and then I could move my foot a little bit. So it took me a solid like 3 years to get to the stretching routine that I have now. And now that I do that religiously every single morning, my spasticity is way more manageable and I'm at half the dose. So it took me going down and improving my spasticity to sort of get my spasms under control. But yeah, I think it's possible. It's just a matter of how much stretching you would have to
Mm.
do to manage your own spasticity or because everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think I've been paralyzed for a long time, so my spasms have definitely reduced. I also have a syrinx, which I don't know if you have ever heard of it before, but
Yeah.
it's
Go
like
for it.
it's a cyst, basically like a cyst in your spinal cord, that sometimes happens after you have a spinal cord injury. They happen to like just normal people too, but it's more likely that you're going to get a syrinx after a spinal cord injury because it has to do with the flow of your cerebral spinal fluid. And if you damage it's called the subarachnoid space where your fluid flows, and you can damage that area in a spinal cord injury. And because you just reduce the ability of that fluid to flow, it can sort of build up and then it gets pushed into your spinal cord just because of increased pressure in areas of reduced
Mm.
volume, or increased volume, I guess, in reduced space. So I have a syrinx, and I
Mm.
think just over time, because I have lots of fluid in my spinal cord, over time that has changed my spasticity some. So yeah, there's a
In
combination of a
like
bunch of things.
more or less?
Lot more fluid.
No, more
Like
spasms,
in
I mean.
I think it's less. I think it's
Oh,
less.
interesting.
So yeah, I'm not sure why that would be, but um there's a combination of things that I don't know exactly whether, they're sort of the culprit. But yeah, the combination of things has made my spasticity manageable, I guess, and better. But yeah, it was a long time to reduce. And so yeah, I think it's possible for you too if
Yeah.
you're willing to go through the discomfort, but it is
So yeah.
uncomfortable.
Well, I don't want to go through the discomfort because I
No.
like being, one of my biggest complaints is spasticity. And at the moment, it's very, very, very manageable. So yeah, I don't want to
Yeah.
go through that discomfort. Although when I go to the doctors, because apparently the maximum you're meant to be on is 80 milligrams
Yeah.
in France. So I have to go back to the doctors earlier every time to get. She can't prescribe me more, but I can go back more often. And yeah, she's saying, oh, you need, if you can take less, that would be great. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to take less, but every time I do take less, my spasms increase. So, obviously I don't like that discomfort, but my spasms have been quite bad recently. Well, I've done so much exercise. Yesterday, I went to the gym, I played tennis, and I went for a swim. And normally exercise is really good for calming my spasms. But last night they were kicking off, and I was like, "What the hell? I've done loads today. I've been really active." Because sometimes I think if I don't do anything, my spasms are worse. They're just like, "Oh, they're sort of communicating with me. You should do something." So yeah, I don't know. And it's something because we've been talking about recently about the new job that I've applied for involves me sitting down for a long period of time. I don't want to be uncomfortable in my chair if I've got to be there for like 10 hours a day, So that's something that's on my mind. Like I don't, again, like we said, if they make the place accessible and then I'm like, oh, my spasms are bad. I don't want to end up taking more baclofen to calm them down and then sort of needing being more dependent on it in the future. So that's something that's like a bit annoying, actually. I mean, obviously there's a lot of annoying things about having a spinal cord injury, but that's one of them that I don't want to take more baclofen, but my spasms, I just wish that I'm like, like sometimes it's just why, like sometimes I'll take my shoe off and I'll take my sock off and I'll be like, look at my foot. I'll be like, well, there's no marks on my foot. Like, why? Just what is it that you need? You need a good stretch. I give it a good stretch. It's still spazzy. Like, yeah. So
I think there's so much with spinal cord injury that is annoying like that you're trying to like tease out a reason why. Like sometimes my bladder will just be really annoying and I'll pee my pants like nonstop and I'm like, what's happening? And there's nothing that I can figure out that's wrong and it's just really annoying because I'm just like, I don't understand. I can go like 3 weeks without peeing my pants at all. And then I'll go 3 weeks peeing my pants every day. And I'm just like, I'm not eating any different. I'm not drinking any different. I'm not doing anything different. I don't have a bladder infection. It's just so annoying. And spasms are like that too. The other day when I was camping, my right leg kept spasming and falling off my foot plate, which was really annoying because I was wheeling on gravel and then my foot would fall off. I would have to stop, put it back up. That would wheel 2.5 feet, not even, and it would fall off again. And I'm just like, oh my God, what's happening? And so I was like, it was taking me so long to get anywhere and it was really annoying. But yeah, there's a lot of like weird bodily things that you can't really explain.
Like a few weeks ago, I think I mentioned it on the podcast about when I said I was really dissatisfied because I weed the bed after I got new sheets for the bed and then I weed the bed, and like I can count on one hand, well maybe not one hand, but like over the last 4 years or 5 years, I don't weed the bed. I so much so I don't wear don't have any protection on the bed. Like it's fine. And then this last 6 months, I've pissed the bed like, I don't know, like loads more. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm waking up. I'm like, again, like I don't drink more at night. I have no idea what's going on. To the point, actually, I've bought some pads for my pants, like little incontinence pads, which are absolutely great, by the way. It gives me such peace of mind. And I don't know why I didn't do it ages ago. I'm just like, it takes no time to slip it in. And then if I do have an accident, then it will just absorb it away. But I don't know what it's weird. The spinal cord injury, you think you've got it under control. You're 5 years in, and then like more spasms, like more bedwetting, and you're like, what the hell is this? What the hell? Why? Like what am I doing differently? Like, or is it something I've eaten? So it keeps you on your toes, and off them.
It definitely keeps you on your toes, and it keeps you like sometimes in like it can get really frustrating when there's something that you're like trying to figure out and you can't. But again, that's another one of those things that like cognitive behavioral therapy helps me out with a lot. Just going, I can handle it. I can handle it. I can handle it. I
Mm,
tell myself I can handle anything. And so sometimes when I'm getting like really pissed about things, I'm like, I can handle it. I can handle it.
yeah,
And the more I tell myself that, generally, the better I do. But because I always say, like, even if I peed my pants every day, I can handle it. Even if I, did this, I can handle it. Would I
yeah,
want to would I want to have to? That's another thing that, like, I think is really pivotal for coming to terms with things that we have to deal with is understanding that mental acceptance of what you have to do is often way, way harder than the actual physical like aspect of what you have to do. So yeah, I don't want to pee my pants every day. Could I handle it if I did? Probably. Could I, handle the fact that I would have to wear incontinence products? Yeah, I could handle that. Would I want to though, right? That's
yeah,
always the clincher. Do I want to handle it? Probably not, but could I? Probably. I probably
yeah,
could. It's just whether
yeah.
you want to or not, right?
It's interesting. It's interesting. I want to segue away because one of the things I wanted to talk about today was I'm now on like 43 or 44-day streak of tracking my meals. And I weighed myself recently and I'd lost
Ooh,
4 kilos. And I was like, no
whoa,
way.
that's a lot.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot. That
So I
in
weigh,
like 40 days?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
So
like that's like almost 10 pounds.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's in, if you want to use freedom units, yeah, it's
Yeah.
10 pounds. But like, yeah, so I, I haven't been weighing myself like incrementally, but like I've mentioned a couple of episodes ago that I've been meal tracking my macros, my protein, carbs, and fats, meal prepping, and my goal was to eat 1,600 calories a day for a week, and then I thought, well, maybe I can just keep doing that because that seems completely sustainable. Like I'm not overly hungry. And then I weighed myself yesterday morning and I was like, no way. I was 68 kilos and now I'm 64. And I was like, wow, I've lost 4 kilos. Like, and my goal actually wasn't to weigh less. It was just to like trim down body fat. But I've been like having 140 grams of protein a day. So I'm really hoping that I haven't lost muscle mass. But yeah, I'm feeling quite trim and you can see my abs a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really stoked. I was really proud of myself and I wanted to share that on the poddy.
That is amazing. That's really amazing. I think that's like brings up a really good sort of topic in that nutrition is more important than exercise, and exercise is really important, but nutrition is really important. And it's kind of like budgeting. Like if you think about tracking your macros like budgeting, you can't get better at, spending or not spending your money if you don't know how much you're spending on any one thing, right? So if you're
Yeah.
like, I am going to save some money, but you don't know how much you're currently spending and you don't know how much your actual income is, then you
Mm.
can't save money, right? So I think budgeting your calories is just as important as budgeting your money. And obviously, you don't have to do it all the time, like I'm on holidays or whatever, but you
Mm.
should generally know what calories are in things, because again,
Yeah.
like we talked about on another podcast, it lets you know when you are having those expensive snacks.
Yeah,
um
and it's a
yeah,
great analogy, and that's what we use the parlance of money. We're like, oh, that's an expensive meal, or that's an expensive snack, and I'm like, yeah, that's. So I've been making these meals recently, like chicken, rice, and vegetables, and they're about 350 to 400 calories, so which is perfect. And then I have like a snack, and I'm like, oh, that's 400 calories. I'm like, I might have to sacrifice dinner if I have that. And then I'm like, well, actually, I can say no to that because the chicken, rice, and vegetables are going to really fill me up, and they're going to hit all
yeah,
my macros. Where this is just going to like shoot my sugar through the roof. So
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, totally. I had some other questions for you, or some other things that I wanted to talk about, which it kind of made me think about it when you were talking about the plane, because
Mhm.
one of the things that I wanted to sort of talk about my trip is having people that are with me that are used to seeing me pee, and not that like because I
Mm.
pee from my chair and I pee with a zipper in the crotch of my pants and I do it very discreetly, so you can really just see a catheter coming out of the side of my underwear. So you can't really see anything. But my nephew is with me this time, and my nephews are with me a lot. We take them lots of places. Joe's brother's son and my sister's son. And so my sister's son was with me, and they just get used to me peeing everywhere because I have to pee in the car, I have to pee in the trailer, and I can't get really in the bathroom. And so, and I in the plane, I pee in the seat. So whoever I'm
Yeah.
with,
Oh, really?
usually, yeah, I pee in the seat. So whoever I'm with usually just like takes my container of pee in a little bag that I have and to take it to the bathroom. So I'm just curious about if that's a thing with you too. Do people like your friends and
Mm.
people that you are with a lot, do they get used to seeing you pee?
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely a thing. So my girlfriend, I pee everywhere. Like
Yeah.
with my girlfriend. But yeah, all of my friends, most of my friends. It was interesting when I went on holiday to Bucharest. I had to go with my work colleagues, and I had to just say to them, "Hey, look, I need a wee," and they're like, "Oh God, we need to find a toilet for Fred." And I was like, "No, no, actually, I just need
Yeah.
somewhere." Like I could just basically just go over there by the tree. Like if if someone wants to just come and just give me some cover, or I could do
Yeah.
it with like I was at the fireworks recently and I was around there were loads of people and I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna wheel all the way up to that hotel to like queue
Mm-mm.
up for the toilet. So I just put I've got a roll up, what would you call it, like a puffer jacket, so
Yeah.
and it just stays in my bag, so I roll that out, I put the hood over me, and I had a little head torch, so I get the head torch, hood over me, and then I can just pull down my pants, do a catheter, because it's one of those self-contained ones,
Yeah.
and that's it, it's done. And I don't care if people like, basically I'm just it's dark, or wherever you are, you're just you've got a coat over you, or a towel over you,
Hmm.
and if people look, then they look. If they see it, whatever. Like, I'm trying my best to not indecently expose myself. If you look through the cracks and you're like really nosy, you might see my willy. Well done, you.
Ah, oh my God, that's so funny. Oh, what was I gonna say? I just was thinking of something. Now it's bugging me. Oh, what do you do with your when your bag is full, like the self-contained bag? Do you like cut the like rip it open and dump it on the ground? What do you do with the pee?
No, normally I just put it in my bag. I carry a garbage bag, like a plastic garbage bag in my bag, and then I put it inside there. So just in case it gets nicked or something, it won't leak through my bag. Fingers crossed, hopefully. And then yeah, I just put them in there. Like what sometimes I'll carry like 3 or 4 around with me if I've been out all day. Or because like if I'm out somewhere, like I don't want to like just empty the wee on the ground. I mean, I could do it. It really depends. If
Yeah.
I And then if I find like a bin, I'll just throw them in the bin. And I know it's
Yeah.
probably not ideal to throw those in like a regular bin, but
Why not? I
yeah.
do. Like if I have the self-contained ones, like and I'm on a plane or something, I'll usually just throw it in the garbage. Like I wrap it up in a couple of grocery bags really well.
Mm,
But it's interesting that we have different like sort of philosophies around peeing because I have a lot of friends that use the self-contained bags, but to me they're just more annoying because then you have this bag of pee that you're carrying around. Whereas if I pee, I carry like a male urinal is what I carry in my backpack in a little purse thingy, so it doesn't look like anything in my bag. And then I pee into that and I dump it in some sort of like area. Like if I'm like out and I pee like behind somewhere that's not a
mm,
bathroom, then I'll find like a tree or like a bush or something to dump my
mm,
pee in. Or if I'm like peeing in my car, I'll go to like the edge of the parking lot and dump it. Cause I'm always just like, I don't want to carry pee around with me all day. So that's sort of I've gotten used to doing it that way. And I'd rather just pee into a container and find somewhere to dump the pee out. or find a bathroom to dump the pee in eventually, than to have to carry around these self-contained bags of pee. But I do take them in situations where, you know, you can't dump it out and you
Yeah.
have to be able to carry it in a enclosed like space. But yeah, interesting that you get used to people seeing you pee. And I'm
Yeah, and I
like,
think it's a great party trick as well. Like, because
yeah,
I'm a you know, if I'm at the poker with the lads, you know, and I'm like, because when I was actually on holiday with Dan was one of my work colleagues, I was like, hey man, do you want to see it? And he was like, yeah, actually, I really do want to see it. And I was like, okay, here it goes. And you're like, this 30-centimeter tube right up the urethra. Whoop. And everyone's like, oh, man. Oh, my God. How do you do that? I'm like, well, you know, I can't really
uh,
feel it that much, you know? And yeah, it's funny. It's great. The reactions I get are brilliant.
that's so funny. I can't say
Yeah.
that I've ever showed anybody like well, I have shown plenty of women how I pee in real time, but you can't see anything in my
Yeah.
situation because, you know, it's just sort of hidden by my underwear because I just do it. I pull the underwear aside. But yeah, I don't think that women are as like interested, but our urethras are so short. They're like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
like a centimeter and a half or something. Like they're so short. So it's not as interesting. And I don't think that girls have that like factor that guys have when they see something going up like a male pee hole. Because guys
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely get like the heebie-jeebies when they see that. That's so
Yeah.
funny.
Oh man, on the subject of spasms, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm like wriggling around like crazy. My spasms are kicking up again today, and I have no idea why. But anyway, we'll move on because it's just a visual thing. But damn it,
I
it's
haven't
annoying.
noticed. I
Yeah,
haven't
man, I've
noticed. I
been
just thought
wriggling
you were
around.
antsy.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to pacify my legs. I don't know what I can do to calm them down, but they're jumping around all over the place. But anyway, yeah, do you have any more questions?
Let's see what's on my list. I don't know if I have any more questions. But I guess I could turn this into a question because I was going to talk about being in close quarters with very little privacy and how you would handle that. Because obviously I'm in a trailer with my entire family.
Mm,
And when I get up in the morning, now in this new trailer, the kids have like a bunk bed room and the door shuts to that. But normally, like I get up in the morning, I give myself my suppository. I'm getting up like bare ass to wheel to the like bathroom so that I can get on the toilet. So I'm always like nervous if like my kids, I'm not like super worried about because
mm,
I'm like sitting down and I'm sitting on my, you know,
mm,
parts. So if they get up, they're seeing basically my legs. But I'm
mm.
always like worried about that when I have like my nephew or whatever. But then when I get back into bed, I don't have a door like where my bed is. So like I'm getting dressed with my butt directly facing like the kids' bedroom. And if they get up and they come in, they're gonna be like, "Oh, there's mom's butthole. That's really not what I wanted to see in the morning." So, um, and so I'm just curious, like if you've ever stayed with anybody that, you know, like if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, obviously you're intimate with them, they're used to seeing that kind of stuff. Or if you get nervous traveling with people, have you ever stayed in a hotel room with like a friend that you're not super comfortable with, or just have been in close quarters with people that you don't have the kind of privacy that you
Mm.
hope for, and how you handle that or how you have handled that?
I think the closest I can think of is when I went to Bucharest with the people I worked with, and a lot of I didn't go into detail about like bowel routines or anything, but a lot of them were like, I didn't know you had to use a catheter. I didn't know you had to do that, and like, oh, Dan got to see it. I was like, hey, if anyone else wants to see it, you know, I'll show you. It's fine. They never actually followed through on that, but yeah, I think the answer to the question is no, not really, but I think I would be quite comfortable in just saying, oh, hey, by the way, oh no, actually, I tell you what, it happened actually by the lake. There was a friend called Katie, and she is the personal trainer for my girlfriend. And so I was like, oh, I need a wee. And she was like, oh, okay, should we go to the toilet? I was like, no, I don't need to go to the toilet. I use a catheter. Basically, I didn't really go into details. I just use a catheter. I just need to go somewhere where there's some cover. So if I just go over by that tree, if you guys can just cover me. And she was like, oh, okay. And I could tell that she was like, I did definitely not know that was a thing. And she saw me like put the hood over, and I did it. And and that was it. And she just, I guess, accepted it. The next time I needed a wee, she was like, "Oh, okay, let's go over by that tree," and so she knew what to
Oh,
expect. So I guess
yeah.
bringing it up can be a little bit awkward in front of strangers, but at the same time, yeah, I find that you just do it. You just,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
That's
people
always
just
been
don't
my
know,
experience too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's always been my experience too. But I'm still uncomfortable just personally staying in like a hotel room with somebody that I don't know super well. Like
Mm,
there's been times where like I've been invited to camps, like sporting camps or other things where I would be staying in a room with somebody that I don't know. Or that I don't know very well. And I pee in the middle of the night into a container. So I need to turn a light on. I have the container in between
mm,
my legs. I'm peeing into that container. And it's not like awful. Like you can't really see anything when I'm peeing because I still have my underwear on and stuff like that. But it's it's just one of those things that I'm always like, ooh, it's like a little
mm,
uncomfortable when you're in close quarters with somebody that you're not entirely comfortable with on a private level.
mm,
But for me, it's really nice being around kids because, like, I've traveled with like my daughter's friends and I've traveled with my nephews, and they're so accepting. Like, they're just like, oh, because
mm.
my daughter is always like, my mom has to pee in the car, and at first her friends are like, what? Your mom pees in the car, and then she explains to them what I'm doing. So we'll stop somewhere for on like a road trip, and they'll go into like a McDonald's or something to go get a drink or something and use the bathroom, and I'll pee in the car.
Mm.
And so then I kind of get my little bit of privacy while the girls go get like, a pop or something. But it's always interesting when, my kids just so freely tell their friends the things that I have to do, and I'm always like, oh my God, it's going to be such a big deal. And they're so used to it that they're just
Yeah.
like, oh, my mom just has to pee in the car. She uses a catheter. So she kind of pees like a man, and she just pees into a container. It's easier than getting out and going into the bathroom. And so then they're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
well,
I love
we'll
that.
go. Yeah.
I love that kids have just like an unashamedly, they don't have that filter that adults have. They're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
my mum does this. And the other kids are like, oh, cool. And then,
Yeah, I know. Which is so nice because like I always think that like my situation is going to embarrass my kids, like that
yeah.
I'm going to be a source of embarrassment for them, and it's never been the case. Like my friends or my daughter's friends are never like, we'll go somewhere and they'll all pile in the vehicle with me and they're all trying to get around my wheelchair, or they're lifting my wheelchair in and out. Like her friends will just do it. Like they'll just be like, lift my wheelchair in, we'll go, and they'll lift it out. They get used to it so fast. And it's a strange thing to see how accepting kids are. And we always, like, at what point, I wonder, does that get like bred out of kids, like from
Mm.
society, like where the acceptance level goes down and they're uncomfortable around people that are different instead of just like automatically accepting whatever it is. Like, and I don't know when it is because like my kids are, Jacob's going to be 16 in 2 months, and his friends are all really accepting too. So I'm like,
Mm.
I wonder when that happens. Is it when we become an adult, or is it just an
Mm.
illusion that we think people are less accepting? I don't know.
I think if you've like been around people with disabilities, I haven't been around people with disabilities before my accident that much. I had no idea about catheters. So I guess if you get exposed to that at a young age, and then you meet people and like, oh yeah, like Brittany's or Jacob's mum used to do that. That's fine. Like so yeah, I don't know. Like, and I think
Yeah.
kids. There's also I was on my bike earlier. I went to get a haircut. Thanks for noticing. And I was on my
I
bike.
did actually notice. I was totally gonna say you look very trim today, like very like put
You.
together.
So I was outside the barbershop with my bike, and this kid came past, and she was like, "Oh, that's such a cool bike. What kind of bike is that?" But she said it to her parents, and her parents were just like, "No, no, 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 no! Like, don't bother the wheelchair man." And I remember
Yeah.
thinking, "Hey, like, I should have just. Hey, by the way, this is a wheelchair bike. It attaches to my wheelchair. It's basically a trike. It's a little bit different to the other bikes you see around town. I would have loved to have had that conversation, but I kind of thought of it in hindsight. But it's interesting
Yeah.
how sometimes parents just say, "Hey, oh, don't bother that man. Don't ask that inappropriate question." It's not an inappropriate question at all.
Yeah.
I love talking about my bike. It's cool.
Yeah, I know. I get that a lot where parents kind of shush their kids and I do feel bad when I'm in a hurry and I can't kind of go back because sometimes I'll hear a little kid ask their parents in the same way that that little girl asked her parents what the bike is about. Be like, why is that one woman in a wheelchair? Why is that lady in a wheelchair? And sometimes I'm in a hurry, so I don't go back and be like, hey, I heard you ask why I'm in a wheelchair. But most of the time I do. Like if I'm in the grocery
Yeah,
store or something and a kid does and they're in their grocery cart, I'll be like, hey, I heard you ask why I'm in a wheelchair, and I wouldn't mind telling you. So I do generally do that, but I think it's more parents just don't want ever to have their kids make some other person feel uncomfortable. And I do that with my kids sometimes too, which, you should never do. But
yeah,
it's always from a place of like, good intentions. It's just, I
yeah.
think in society, we need to be more accepting and understanding of ignorance than we are now. Like um, we punish people for being ignorant in society right now. Like if
Mm.
somebody unintentionally says something racist, ableist, any ist, we
Mhm.
punish them. And I think that's sad. Instead of
Mm.
being like understanding and just being like, you know what, they have different life experiences and they shouldn't know everything.
Mm.
I think we're less good at being understanding and uh, more community minded and good at educating people instead of punishing them because it's
Yeah.
scary now to say anything because God knows people are gonna think you're discriminating against them in some way, and it's scary kind of. So
Yeah. I would love to go. I would love to talk more about that particular, but in another podcast maybe.
yeah, let's
But
do it.
because I realized that we've just gone past the hour, but I've got a few more things I want to share. But one before I do that, you remember you were saying about kids ask why is that man in a wheelchair, for example. I was
Yeah.
like wheeling down this hill like really quite quickly, and I was in Liverpool. I'm not sure, but they've got a very funny. I'm not sure if you know, but they've got quite a unique accent. And as I wheel, because I was wheeling quite fast, as I went past this lady, all I heard her say was, "Because his legs don't work." I was like, oh my god, it was
Uh,
so funny. I wheeled past, I had the biggest grin on my face. I was like, oh, that's so funny.
I love hearing the parents' answers too. It
Yeah,
is
yeah.
really good. Like sometimes when you hear a wonderful answer, um, that that is very like inclusive or that makes somebody not have a bad experience the next time they see somebody in a wheelchair. So I think parents can do a lot of good with the answers that they give kids. But yeah, I wanted to just address this one comment. I don't know if I can do this on my phone or there. Are you doing live streams now? No more Empowered Para videos. So I just have not posted in a very long time because I've been busy this summer doing holidays and doing things with my kids. So I am posting more videos. I just haven't this summer. So if all you're seeing is lives, I am doing these and also doing regular videos later on. So there is more Empowered Para stuff. It's just
Well, that's cool
not this
because you
summer.
get to see Brittany every week because she turns up every Tuesday. So that's really
Yeah.
cool. Like you get a video and you get a conversation. So one of the things I wanted to sorry to segue away. I realized that we've got a bit of a time
No, go
constraint.
ahead.
But I added a couple of slides. I did something this week which I
Go
thought was
for it.
really
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah. So I basically I drew a picture for my landlady, and I basically had no idea. Well, I mean, I underestimated the response it was going to get. She likes chickens, and recently all her chickens got killed by a fox. She had like 17
Oh,
chickens, and the fox just demolished the lot. And she'd had them for over 5 years, and she was really upset. Um, and she gave me some canvases. So I thought, oh, I'll just draw a little picture of her and the chicken, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to put this. Hopefully, it works. So that's my landlady with the chicken. She's very lovely. And then this is the picture that I drew of her. So I painted this canvas.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's quite
What?
sweet.
You're so artistic.
Thank you. So I gave it to her, and in my like perfectionist brain, I was like, oh, I don't know if it's that good. I don't know whether to add more detail, more shading, etc. I don't know if it's ready. And when I gave it to her, I was absolutely blown away by how much it meant to her. She
Yeah.
was so stoked. She was smiling from ear to ear. She absolutely loved it. and she just couldn't believe it. And I saw her like go back to her house, and she stopped walking. She looked at it. She walked a bit more. She stopped walking, looked at it, smiled, and she was like, "Oh, this is amazing. I'm going to put it up in my shop." And I think it's just like I say, it was a lovely thing to do, but I hadn't anticipated how much she was going to love it, and it really filled me up, man. I was just like, "Oh, that is like her." Her joy was so contagious, and I was like, "Oh, that is a lovely thing that I've just done," and it really filled me up. And I wanted to share that on the podcast because hopefully I can, infect everyone else with like a little warm sense of, what that little exchange was just so beautiful. She was so made up. So yeah, that was really cool. I really wanted to share that.
So guess what I'm going to make you do now? I'm going to
What's
make
that?
you draw a cartoon of me and you. I want us to be a cartoon on on the thumbnails. Do it,
Okay.
please. Just
Well, I
draw
think
the
the
same,
reason,
I love that
yeah,
picture.
I think the reason why I haven't been so enthused with that idea is because I think it gets a lot more when it comes to thumbnails. I think
Yeah,
pictures of you and I get a lot more recognition than like
probably.
caricatures. But I could definitely do it for fun. Like, yeah, for sure.
Do it for fun, even if we just have a little circle in the bottom that's like a cartoon.
Yeah.
Please. You're
All
like
right, I'll
very
do it.
artistic.
I'll
I
do it.
I wish I wish I could draw like really well. There's a few things that I'm like in awe of, and people that can draw is like it's like at the top of my list of things that I think is very inspirational because I don't understand how people can take something that's in their head and put it on paper with the right proportions, and it just doesn't come naturally to me. Like I can draw well enough that people can be like, "Oh, that's this," or, whatever it is I'm trying to draw, but I can't. Yeah, I just don't have the ability to make something amazing.
Yeah.
And obviously you do, so
Well, thank you.
do it.
That's very kind of you. That's a very kind compliment. And yeah, I think it's nice. I mean, to be honest, I feel like that's just a little cartoon drawing. It's very easy to do. It's not overly difficult. I use a lot of reference images as well. So like, if you could just Google like lady with chicken and then like make it more like my landlady, it's I don't know. I feel like it's if you once you know how to do it, like it's not that
Maybe.
technically difficult, but it's nice. But the,
Maybe.
the finished product, when you present the finished product, it's a really nice thing. It's like,
Yeah.
oh wow, like that's really cool. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I
Um,
think that's really cool.
I did have one more like funny story, I guess.
Yeah, go for it.
Should we just go for it? I know that we're like a little bit
Yeah.
over on time, but something just really funny happened to me, and I just like, man, I've got to tell that on the podcast. It's kind of funny. So do you remember I said like one of my pet peeves is people being in the disabled changing rooms. So
Hmm.
I'm going for a swim, and I like to have like a little bit of a gummy before the swim. I've told you this before, but like, so I come out the pool. I'm feeling extra chill. I'm just rolling up to the disabled changing rooms, and I've got the like the little key to open it. It's not like a key; it's you
Yeah.
could just open it with a coin. Didn't expect anyone to be in there, and there was a woman in there, and I was like, "Oh, sorry," and she was like, "Oh no, sorry." And she was almost done. She was like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to be in here. I'm sorry. I'll leave." And I was like, "Yeah, no worries." Didn't think anything of it. And she went. I shouldn't laugh, but she was like, "The thing is, I've got cancer," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And she's like,
Oh my God.
I just wanted a bit more room, and so I'm sorry, but and I was like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
no worries." And she left, and I went in, and I was just there, like, what?
Uh,
Like, sorry, I just thought,
you don't know what to say. There are definitely so many times where people have shared some random medical not like thing with me because they've been in the like accessible bathroom. Um, I don't know, like some weird thing that and it's not funny that she has cancer like in any way
right?
at all. Like that's awful and horrible and really hard. But like the random things that people share with you about
Yeah,
why they're using some space that's like bigger is you're just like you're trying to tease out in your own mind whether that makes sense and whether you feel compassion for them or whether you're just confused and you're like, okay, like, yeah.
I
I
just
don't
didn't know
know.
how to react. I thought I'd share it like without reaction to get your reaction, but I was like, okay, cool. Like this is the only one that the doors open outwards. So I know if I'm sorry you got cancer, and I'm sorry if you wanted a bit more room, but this is literally the only one in the whole that I
Yeah.
can use. And I didn't say that. I didn't make her feel bad. I was just like, no, it's all good.
Yeah.
No worries. But I was just in
Yeah.
there, especially
Go.
after having a gummy. I was just like, I'm a bit stoned, just
What?
like, that lady say she had cancer? What the hell? How is
Yeah,
that relevant to being in
I
the
know.
it's like
And
some
it's
sort of
like
excuse. Yeah.
it is a really weird thing, and you definitely get. I had like an interesting comment on YouTube a while ago when I was talking about not using accessible bathrooms. And one lady said, some of us have invisible disabilities, give us a break too. And my exact answer to her was, an invisible disability without a mobility device is not any good excuse to use the one stall that is made bigger for visible mobility device using
Mm.
disabilities. And she was like, well, I have Crohn's disease, and it's easier for me when I'm in there when I have to use some of the equipment I need for my colostomy bag. And I was like, okay, I get it. You have lots of stuff for your colostomy bag. I'm like, can you physically get in the other bathroom stalls? Because I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she was
Yeah.
like, well, so I had that like conversation with her, and I wasn't rude in the comments. I just said,
Mm.
because something is convenient for you doesn't mean that you should use it. The you know stalls that we have are not conveniences to us. They are the only option. We can't get into other ones. So even though the bigger one might be more convenient for you, the small ones actually still work for you.
Right.
And so then after that, she was like, I'd never looked at it like that. She's like, it's really just convenience that I'm looking for, not my only option. And I was like, yeah, your convenience is taking away my opportunity entirely. If you are in the
Mm.
bathroom for 20 minutes doing your colostomy bag, I
Yeah.
don't have the opportunity to use the bathroom. So it's interesting, the excuses. And it might sound cruel to say that it's an excuse, but it is an excuse
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's an interesting story, and I think it comes up a lot when people
Mm.
give you their personal medical information that isn't relevant, just so that you'll feel some level of compassion for them, rather
Yeah.
than annoyance.
So I was in the airport, and I was waiting to use the disabled toilet, and one of the staff members came out, and when she saw me, she was like, "I've got a really bad back," and I was,
Oh,
"Is it as bad as mine?" Like, fuck off.
that's what you gotta say, right? You're like, is it as bad as mine? Yeah. I know. That's like the very interesting things that the one-upping is interesting. And I know that a lot of people do it to relate, which is why I always really try to see it as a way of people relating to you instead of like one-upping you,
Yeah.
because generally I think that's the goal, is that people are trying to be like, we have something similar, even if it's not the exact same thing. I can kind of relate to what you're going through. But it's always interesting for sure, the things that people say to us.
Yeah, and when I go up to the disabled toilets now, I knock on them because you never know who's in there. And if someone comes out in a wheelchair, sweet, that's fine, take your time. But I knock on the door because I'm like, whoever's in there, generally
Yeah.
speaking, it's not someone in a wheelchair. So
Not
yeah,
usually, no.
that's
But
interesting.
yeah, you never know until somebody comes out. And there have been times that I've been like working myself up into a frenzy about like, oh, this person's such an asshole. And then somebody comes out with a stroller or a baby, and that's
Mm,
where the change tables are, at least in Canada. And I'm like, oh, totally, totally using it legitimately. I'm sorry
yeah,
for
yeah.
being an asshole in my mind. But yeah.
No, I don't knock aggressively. I'm just like,
No,
hey,
no, no.
just in
Yeah.
case you didn't know, there is someone waiting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
it's
100%.
interesting because when I was on Wheelchair Rick's podcast recently, he asked me what my pet peeve was, and that's what I said it was. But I realized the other day I have a bigger pet peeve, and that is able-bodied people using the elevator to go down when they don't have any luggage or anything. So I was at the gym the other day, and I went to go to use the elevator, and I went up like one floor, and the guy was there, and he was in like mountain bike attire. So he's just about to go out mountain biking for the entire day. He's got his helmet, he's got his pads on, and he gets in the lift, and I was like, going down? He's like, yeah. Didn't fancy the stairs then? He was like, yeah, nah. And I was like, mate, you're going down one floor. It's literally taken you more time to wait for the lift than to just go down. It infuriates me. Like, I understand if you're going up. Like, I still think people should be encouraged to use the stairs if you can, because people, it's good exercise,
Yeah.
And what annoys me was, even at my rehab center, I would catch staff members using the lift to go down one floor. And I'm like, hey, we are like, there's loads of wheelchair users in this rehab center. This is shameful that you're taking up the elevator space.
Yeah.
So that is a bigger pet peeve than the changing rooms.
It's interesting. The other day I had an experience, well, before I left for my holiday, I had an experience where I went to physio and I was going down, and I had an opposite experience where I had a guy who was adamant about not using the elevator. And that's so odd, because I was just going to hold it for him because he was coming out of one of the doors of one of the other like businesses. And I was like going down, and he was like, yeah, but I'm going to use the stairs. And I was like, oh, you're going to use, so you're going to get some exercise. And he was like, I never use elevators. He was like, why would I? I can walk.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting. I've never, ever had somebody be so adamant. And I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. And then when we got to the bottom, I got to the bottom relatively at the same time. And he was like, hey, I thought it would be way faster to take the stairs, but I guess we're at the same time. So we were just like comparing the timing of it. But it was so interesting, because usually if I like hold the elevator, people are like, yep, I'm coming in. And I don't even think about it, because everybody uses the elevator, right? So
yeah, 100%. Because we were talking about weight loss recently, well, on the podcast. If you're able-bodied and you're watching this, take the stairs, not the elevator. I know, like we say, nutrition is more important, but like if you make those little choices of like, I'm going to take the stairs instead of the escalator, I'm going to take the stairs instead of the lift, that really, really adds up. If you get that mental mindset to like, be as active as possible, then that will help with weight loss and just general fitness.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I think we've run over a little bit. I don't know. Should we pack it up, pack it in? Should we bring it home?
Sure. Let's bring it home. Yeah.
This has been really fun. Thanks so much, Brittany. I really appreciate you sharing. And we will see you guys next week.
Yeah. See you guys next week.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.